This is the first of a series of tutorials on individual effects. I'm going to look at a few at a time based on their individual categories. To follow along, open up these two files, Gettysburg 1 and Instrumental Mix. To find them, Gettysburg 1 will be inside the Working Files Narration subfolder. Instrumental Mix is under Music, Just Too Hard to Find subfolder right there. I'm going to start off with the most heavily populated group of effects, the Amplitude and Compression group. This really should be named Amplitude, Compression, Expander, and Limiter because all these effects in some way do some of those four different things. In this tutorial right now, I'm going to look at four effects, the ones that are geared specifically toward compression, but they also have some other characteristics as well. And the compression effects are dynamics processing, multiband compressor, single band compressor, and tube modeled compressor. I'm going to look at 6 other effects in the next tutorial, and then look at these envelope effects in the final of the 3 tutorials about amplitude and compression. So we're going to start by looking at the amplitude and compression compressor effects. I've loaded up 3 effects here on the instrumental piece and 3 effects over here on the narration, on the spoken word piece. And in the end, we're going to look at 4 effects because there's some duplication here. So let's go back to the instrumental. We'll start with the dynamics processing effect. I'll turn it on and open it up. When you look at it, you're going to go, it's just a line, right? Well, this really is the be-all, end-all for all the kind of compressor effects. This not only compresses, but it limits or expands. So what do we mean by compression and limiting and expanding? Compression takes the highest volume and brings it down, the quietest volume and increases it, raises it, so that you kind of squish things to make them have a little more emphasis in the middle. But expanding is kind of the opposite of that. It takes quiet passages and makes them louder without raising the loudest passages. And limiting basically says, okay, nothing louder than this level, essentially. And this can do all 3 of those things in some kind of combination. Now, these guys are really complicated. I mean, some of them are, for guys with audio engineering degrees and not for folks just getting into audio. And avoid kind of being totally confused by them, you can always fall back and click on this little I button. And that'll take you to the help file for this effect. For example, here's the one we're working on right now, dynamics processing. And it'll say CS 5.5 here because I'm doing this tutorial before they release the CS6 version of the help file, but the dynamics processing effect help file probably won't change at all from the 5.5 to the 6. But here's the explanation about the categories, the properties within that effect, to at least kind of give you an idea of what it can do. My suggestion, though, is that you start by using presets. If you go back here, you look at the default. Default basically is a straight line. What this means is that the quietest passage stays at the quietest level, the loudest passage stays at the loudest level. A typical compressor would take the loudest passage and bring them down. This line down here is the input, what comes in. This line is the output. So the input is loud, 0 dBFS, that's 0 decibels below full scale. Here I'm bringing it down, so it's not quite so loud when it goes out. Here the quietest passage is, silent essentially. I can lift that up so that the quiet passages get a little more power. So that's a basic approach to compression. But if you look at some presets, that's a little more helpful. So here's boomy kick. I'll play a little bit, turning it on, turning it off. It's off, on. And I'm here to tell you, a lot of these dynamics processing compressor type effects are subtle. And at first you're kind of going, what's the big deal? I don't hear any difference. But the more you kind of play the before and the after, you begin to feel, okay, yeah, that does make it just a little bit better. And so this is one of those things that you play with until you think, okay, I understand now that this is going to help me with a vocal, or this is going to help me with just that drum or something like that. And you can apply these effects to those instruments within a multi-track session or to a whole mixed piece when you're done. Nevertheless, that's dynamic processing. If you look at all the presets, you can see that there are lots and lots of presets that you can try out. I'm going to move on now. Look at the multi-band compressor. Turn this one off, turn this one on. This is one of those VST effects I talked about, Virtual Studio Technology from the company in Germany, Steinberg. And Isotope is one of their main producers of VST effects, and here they are inside Audition. There's several Isotope VST effects in Audition. And one of the cool things about VST effects is they tend to have really neat looking interfaces like this. What this compressor allows you to do is to work within individual frequency bands, not just overall volume for the whole piece, but volume within a band. And you can define the width of the band like this. It's really quite amazing. I'll just try out this Pop Master preset here. Listen to this one. It's off. On. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to start sliding some things around here just to give you a sense of what you can do, and I'm going to solo some of these channels so you can see how they sound. It's just really an amazing little tool. So you get a sense of what you can do. Not only can you solo these guys and work on them individually, but you can change the width. Watch this. So you can decide which areas you want to work on and what you're going to do for each area. So that's the multi-band compressor, an amazing little tool. Close that guy down. Go to the tube modeled compressor now. I'll turn it on, turn off the multi-band, open it up. This is, again, from Isotope. What this is supposed to do is it's supposed to emulate an old vintage tube-based compressor, which is supposed to have a warmer sound to it. But it's a digital thing emulating a tube thing. So I think it's kind of, I don't know, more marketing perhaps than reality, but you'll be able to hear some differences. Whether it's warm or not, that's kind of up to you to make that decision. So let's try this little low-mid enhancer now. Clearly makes a difference. If you look at, there are more inputs here, more options here, including some voice issues. So I'm going to switch sides now from working inside this instrumental and go over to the narration side of things. I've got that tube modeled compressor here too. I'm going to turn it on. We'll try some of the vocals here. This is a vocal booster.
7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated.
So clearly it does really emphasize that range of the voice and pushes it out in front. It's lots of times a vocal booster lets you put a vocal on top of an instrument and have the vocals stand out from the instrument. So these kinds of things can really help. Whether the tube modeled one really makes it warm or not, that's what these compressors can do when it comes to vocals. I'm going to try a different vocal here that doesn't always work. We'll try the voice over now and see how that one sounds.
To the proposition that all men are created equal.
I'm not so sure that's all that different, all that really dramatic. We'll try a voice leveler here.
7 years ago, our fathers.
Yeah, so I mean, sometimes you're kind of going, what's the big deal? How about vocal attacker?
7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent.
Listen to the silent passages with this one, though.
A new nation, conceived in liberty. And
there's kind of this sound in the silent passages. So some of these guys can be helpful, and some of these guys can actually cause some problems. So you really need to try them out and see which one works best for your circumstances. And again, start by using the presets and then move on from there. We look at a couple other ones that we've talked about before. The dynamics processing one, we'll go back to you, and you'll notice that it has some vocal settings as well. We'll go down here a ways to the rock vocal. See how it goes. Here we go.
7 years ago. Our fathers.
Do I sound like a rock vocal? I'm not sure. Let's let's move down a little bit farther to the voiceover again. Again, this is the dynamics processing version of voiceover.
7 years ago.
Listen to the sound in the quiet passages.
Our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation.
Hear that? So there's kind of rough edge to it. So yeah. So again, try the presets, but maybe take a pass on some of them. Move on to the single band compressor. This one really is geared to a variety of circumstances, but it's best used for a vocal, I think. And we'll try the brick wall limiter first, though.
7 years ago, our fathers brought forth.
If you listen to it, it has kind of a flanger sound, kind of sound to it. I'm not sure that's really the best, but let's try this voiceover one.
7 years ago.
Okay, so these guys, there's lots of duplication from one to the other. Which one do you use? Why use that one? I think if you go back to the other side here, I think my favorite one is the multi-band compressor. That just, I think, gives you the most latitude. The dynamics processing one, I think, is best if you take a look at the presets and if you know a lot about what these other guys can do and you're willing to try them out. But I think the most sort of intuitive one is the multi-band compressor, which is real time. You can adjust things in real time and see how it sounds overall. So those are the 4 main compressor effects. In the other tutorials about this category, we're going to take a look at the sort of remaining kind of catch-all effects and then save the 2 envelope effects for the 3rd tutorial in the series.